Hi everyone, my name is Whitney Glenn and I am doing my narrative presentation on the evolution of agriculture and especially on the rise of the modern monoculture. Um, so to begin, I just want to go over a little history of agriculture and how we got to where we are. So our ancestors transitioned from a hunter-gatherer lifestyle to an agricultural society about 10,000 BC. Um, they may have made this transition because of drought or climate didn't allow for them to forage enough food to feed rising populations, or drought or climate affected what was available to them. They We do know that they did know that if you germinated seeds, they would grow in the ground. So maybe just access to domesticated seeds allowed them to make this transition. This happened independently across different continents at the same time. So I think that's important that humans came to this conclusion of agriculture separately, but they all got there. Um, it provided a greater access to a greater number of calories. So as growing crops gave them 10 to 100 times greater calories per acre than foraging. People were also able to grow a surplus of food, so this allowed other for people to do other things besides work on their food supplies, and not everyone had to devote themselves to farming. Um, the next revolution that occurred was the mechanical revolution. This was around the time of the Industrial Revolution between the 1700s and the 1800s. Instead of using manual labor or animal labor to man the fields, machines helped with this, and it led to a greater production of crops and a large boom in population. And despite access to greater amounts of food, um, farmers, as they were, prior to this and still now, were vulnerable to, um, drought, resource degradation, and changing in productivity that could challenge the amount of food that they had access to. Um, this brings me to Thomas Malthus and Charles Darwin. So Malthus was an economist, and he had theories about the exponential growth of human population and the amount of resources, and it would come to this, crossroads where a catastrophe would happen, like famine or war, over the resources, because there would be more people than what we had available to eat. And Charles Darwin, the famous father of evolution, was influenced by Malthus's theory. He, prior to this, believed that populations only bred numbers that they need, that could be sustained, that they, just automatically did that. And then realizing that limited resources were created competition, that variation was an important part of, of populations in order to succeed. So I thought that was an interesting aspect of this. So this takes us to the Green Revolution. This is modern agriculture, where we're at with, we have high yield plants, the use of pesticides and herbicides to control what's eating our plants besides us, and what's growing around them, what's competing with them. Irrigation, the use of water to get where to grow in less than perfect situations, and fertilizers, which gave the soil more nutrients to grow better plants. So our first scientist is Norman Borlaug. He uh, was an agriculturist in the 1940s. He went down to Mexico from Iowa, and he began researching on high yield disease resistant varieties of wheat. He was crossbreeding plants to come up with the best plant that would produce more food and be resistant to disease. Now, this is a genetically modified food because he was crossbreeding different strains to get something that was desired. This is different than genetically engineered food, which um, DNA from one organism is inserted into another organism to obtain a desired result. So, as as his work went on through the 50s and 60s, his technology spread across the world, and he saved a lot of people from starving with his technology and won the 1970 Nobel Peace Prize for doing so. Pesticides are another help to fuel the green revolution. DDT in particular was a widespread pesticide used all over. It was developed by the Swiss chemist Paul Mueller in 1939. Well, actually, it has been discovered in the late 1800s, but shelved, and then he revisited it in 39 and found that it was a very effective contact killer of pests, and so it was really used to eradicate bugs in areas prone to like malaria and you know insect-borne pathogens. So but farmers also found it very useful for agriculture. They could spray their crops and it could kill um everything, not just the pests but everything. This led to uh biomagnification in humans. So the chemical, by the time the humans ate it, was more concentrated in them than it would be like in the individual plants per se. Um, so it was found to pose risk to human life and wildlife health. So it was banned in 1972. There's still um, pesticides and herbicides used today, especially in conjunction with genetically engineered plants, which we'll get to. Irrigation, super important to the rise of modern agriculture. They believe this came up as a response to drought conditions of the 1950s. Piping in water from different sources allowed farmers to grow in hostile conditions, that they couldn't do prior to that. They could grow on hillsides, they could grow in drier areas, and so this doubled the it allowed for more land to be farmed. Chemical fertilizers really changed the game for farming too. So nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus are all important nutrients needed for plants to grow. Developed in 1905, the scientists Haber and Bosch came up with a process to fix nitrogen to make it usable for plants. This prior to this, you would rely on distillation or just nitrogen fixing plants to um, take the atmospheric nitrogen and change it into a useful form, ammonia, that the plants could use. Now you have chemical plants that do this, and you can buy bags of it and spread the nitrogen out as you need it. This is got a few different problems, like it adds, well, anyway, that's off topic. So the trade-off, so we have the monoculture, which is acres and acres of one single crop being grown. So this so 60% of the world's calories come from three crops: rice, wheat, and maize. This can create a very vulnerable situation, especially with climate change and changing growing conditions. If the wheat is all affected, there goes 20% of all the world's food. Genetically engineered crops they can be very controversial. Generally, like BT corn is a genetically engineered crop that is resistant to a specific herbicide. So this one crop is planted, and the whole the whole field is sprayed, and all the weeds around it die, but the crop is unaffected by um, the herbicide. So this is pretty cool, actually, but it can lead to super weeds and super pests that are no longer susceptible to the chemical, and then it leads to the development of stronger and stronger chemicals, and we could be back to DDT before we know it. It, it this loss of biodiversity, there's just one crop being grown for acres and acres, which also is a loss of biodiversity. This land has got one producer. So what what can what can that support? Like, which organisms around it are thriving, and maybe uh it's abundant but less, losing a species richness. Also, this leads to soil degradation and erosion. Plowing and tilling removes the organic layer of soil and the A horizon, and with that, the important fungi and microbes in the soil and the nutrients, and this makes the soil more vulnerable to wind and rain washing away, which leads to nutrient pollution as the soil runs into the waterways and can cause eutrophic conditions there. So there are trade-offs that come with a higher crop yield. Looking forward, climate change is inevitable. We can expect drought in some places and increased precipitation in other places. So a combination of biotech and organic farming, the ways of the past, might be the way to go to create a balance that is more sustainable. With organic farming, diversity of crops can lead to more insect control. We can add nutrients to our soil by composting, and this creates a more equitable system for farmers across the world to participate in this and feed their families and communities. Um, and biotech also plays an important part in developing these seeds that can resist this changing climate. Well, thank you for listening, and have a good night. Bye.